Welcome back to our course on Word 2013. As I mentioned earlier, one of the major features of Office 2013 is the extended support for touchscreen devices. And during this course I'm going to try to make sure that I cover the needs of touchscreen users as comprehensively as I can. However, this does present a couple of issues. One of the issues is that I really don't want to have to go through every single thing in the course twice, because it will take a very long time and the touchscreen device people would get bored with having to do everything with a keyboard and mouse, and vice versa. So generally speaking, I'm going to cover each topic once. However, particularly in the early stages, I do need to point out what the equivalent actions are. So, for example, generally speaking, when I say click during the course, I mean click with a mouse. Generally speaking, that would be the equivalent of tap with a touchscreen device. Having said that, click and tap don't always do exactly the same things, as you will see. Now, just to give you some idea of what I mean by this, I've actually got a Word document open here. You don't need to worry about everything that you can see on the screen, particularly if you're new to Word. Just look at this shape in the middle. This is a picture within a Word document. And if I were to click on that picture with the mouse, what effectively happens is it selects that picture. If I tap with my finger, it not only selects the picture, but it comes up with a little toolbar. Now that toolbar that you see there, you don't get that with the mouse. However, if I right click on the picture with my mouse, you get a completely different menu. Now, in the end, what you can do using these two approaches comes out to be the same. But sometimes what you see, if you like the route towards what you want to do, is different with the two approaches. Now, as I said, it would take a very long time to go through everything twice and show you all of the options, all of the things that might happen depending on which device you're using. So I'm generally speaking going to demonstrate things using keyboard and mouse, because that's still the set of user interface tools that most people use. But particularly where it's very different or where it's very significant, I'm also going to show you the touchscreen approach. And in the early stages I'll tend to show you both, particularly when we cover a new type of what we call gesture, or we cover a new situation. For instance, when we first look at putting pictures into documents. Now, in terms of getting started with touch, there's some help that you can get on Microsoft.com, and there is help available both for Windows 7 users and for Windows 8 users, and there is also general information about using touch in Office 2013. Now, a lot of the information specifically related to Office 2013 we're going to be looking at a little bit later on when we start to look at help, and a lot of the specific and in some cases common or general equivalencies between clicking and tapping we'll cover then. But in the meantime, if you're new to Windows, you've got a touch device, you're not really quite sure how to do some of the basic things, perhaps finding your way around Windows, then this particular page on Microsoft.com, and bear in mind when I'm showing you these pages, but by the time you do this course the pages may have been moved or replaced or whatever, but here's a page related to Windows Touch for Windows 7. You can also find equivalent material for Windows 8, and there's also material related to touch for Office 2013. Now, in relation to Office 2013, we'll be looking at the help on this a little bit later on, but there are some particularly useful items on Office.com, and if you look on Office.com, here's a particularly useful article, I think, which, particularly if you're new to the use of a touch device, if you scroll down the page here, it actually gives you a lot of information about specifically things like the ribbon that we're going to be looking at later, and then how to use various user interface items, how to position an object by dragging, how to select text and objects, how to type, how to use the on-screen keyboard and so on. So if you want a really useful, good guide, this is more explaining why things work the way that they do and giving you a good overview of the approach, and then maybe you can look up specific details using the help later on. That's a very useful article I've found. It's got things about the mini bars and so on. But as I've said already, whenever we do something new or different, and whenever the approach or the effect is different, I will try to cover the touch approach as well. So that's it for the moment on the use of touch. Let's get started on using Microsoft Word 2013.